Honor, courage, loyalty, and compassion comprise the core values of medieval knights. The ideal of the medieval knight emerged around 800 AD under the reign of Charlemagne. During this era, cavalry reigned supreme as one of the most formidable forces on the primary European battlegrounds. However, simply possessing a horse didn't qualify one for the cavalry. Both horse and knight underwent rigorous training, dedicating countless hours to prepare for the myriad scenarios encountered in battle. These valiant warriors bore the responsibility of breaking enemy lines, safeguarding their army's flanks, and engaging in combat with fellow knights. In the Crusades, knights assumed a pivotal role, actively engaging in battles for dominion over the Holy Land. Their motivations for participating in the Crusades were diverse, ranging from religious fervor and the desire to acquire new territories and titles to the allure of plundering cities. As time progressed, numerous knights garnered renown and amassed wealth through their heroic exploits. These accomplished knights earned noble titles and were granted fertile lands, providing them with opportunities for cultivation and prosperity. Many knights became incredibly rich and often lent money to the kings they served. The more fortunate became lords and employed other knights. To secure the longevity of their conquests, these lords permitted peasants to reside on their land, provided they worked and paid taxes. Consequently, private territories, known as fiefdoms, arose, with the owners amassing wealth that included villages, churches, and even castles. To keep their lands safe, they hired men to serve as guards. Some had battalions of soldiers under their command. The offspring of these feudal lords underwent training and education from an early age, preparing them for military leadership. However, the eldest son typically did not directly participate in battles, assuming a role as a strategic commander during wars. Membership in the royal cavalry was exclusive to noble knights and their descendants, turning knighthood into a hereditary title symbolizing wealth and authority. Knights aspired to marry into other noble families or royalty to fortify their lineage. Despite their considerable power, medieval knights owed allegiance to the king, serving as vassals and pledging oaths. Violating these oaths or failing to heed military summons constituted an act of betrayal with severe repercussions, including the nullification of titles, loss of land rights, and even death. The inception of plate armor occurred in the 13th century and underwent continuous refinement over the next 400 years. These medieval knights' armors, often bespoke and considered works of art, marked a transformative chapter in the history of warfare. Comprising numerous interconnected pieces secured by leather straps, these armors required the assistance of a squire for donning. Knights adorned themselves, as well as their horses, with tunics of diverse colors. These tunics also had the family coat of arms or the lords. Beyond aesthetics, these tunics served a practical purpose, shielding the armor from the extremes of heat and cold, thus preserving the metal. The introduction of this advanced armor elevated medieval knights on the battlefield, enabling many to forgo shields and focus solely on offensive maneuvers. While the longsword remains an iconic symbol of medieval knights, it was not particularly effective against armor. Contrary to what is portrayed in movies and games, the swords could not cut the armor. They were most useful when used with one hand holding the blade in a technique known as the half-sword. The goal was to reach the weak points of the armor. The most effective weapons against medieval knight armor were halberds and warhammers. They were heavy weapons and had a strong impact to knead or pierce armor. Many knights decorated their helmets with colored feathers or figures of animals and mythological beings. The goal was to differentiate themselves and show that they did not hide during battle. This proof of self-confidence terrorized low-ranked enemy soldiers, who also had fewer protections to fight with. The advantage of a medieval knight over an infantryman was disproportionate. As a result, many soldiers fled in panic when they had to face the cavalry. However, the knights were not invincible. A determined group of soldiers could surround the knight and overthrow him, putting an end to his noble existence. Due to the high cost of keeping horses, armor, weapons, and servants, it was practically impossible for someone not noble to become a knight. The training of a medieval knight began as a child. At the age of 7, he should begin his studies, learning to read and write. He should also learn good manners and the history of his family. At the age of 14, they began physical training, learning to ride horses, to use various weapons such as swords. At the age of 17, the young aspirant would become a squire. As a squire, he served an experienced knight. He helped the knight to wear armor, besides learning about battle tactics and training in physical conditioning. In times of war, the squires had to follow the knights to the place of battle. There, they waited in the camp or saw the battle at a certain distance. In protracted wars, squires assumed more active roles, providing essential support by delivering water, food, replacing horses, and managing weapons. In certain instances, squires even participated in battle, safeguarding the knight's rear guard. Around the age of 20, the squire could receive the title of knight if he were considered worthy of that honor. During the ceremony, the squire was to spend 24 hours in prayer in a church. Then he would cut his hair and bathe to be presentable in his oath. The young squire had to swear to protect women and the weakest, defend justice, love his homeland, and defend the church with his own life, if necessary. After the oath, the squire knelt down. He received the blessing of the sword, becoming a legitimate knight at the service of the crown. In 1337, the commencement of the 100 Years' War marked a protracted conflict between England and France, two dominant military powers of that era. In this tumultuous war, knights assumed the role of formidable war tanks on the battlefield, executing heavy cavalry offensives armed with long spears capable of striking the enemy from a considerable distance. Amidst the conflict, the historic Battle of Agincourt unfolded, where the British forces, led by King Henry V, triumphed despite being outnumbered by a French army 3 times its size. The formidable English archers played a pivotal role in securing victory, delivering a humiliating defeat to the powerful and numerous French cavalry. When they were not at war, the knights participated in tournaments organized by nobles or kings. In these tournaments, blunt weapons were used. Still, many knights were injured in the fights. The jousting games were the noblest part of tournaments. They had the most valuable prizes and were the most proof of the courage of the medieval knights. During the jousting, a knight used an edgeless spear and galloped at high speed with the objective of hitting and knocking down his opponent. It was necessary to have nerves of steel to remain firm on the horse without running away from the spear that was coming in his direction at almost 80 kilometers per hour. The image of the knight in his shining armor gave rise to many stories and romantic tales during the medieval era. With the arrival of more powerful firearms at the end of the 16th century, the knights slowly became obsolete. With such weapons, a peasant with only a few months of training could bring down a train and fool the equipped knight. Many knights became commanders on the battlefield, thus stopping to expose themselves to firearms. The armor continued to be worn for a long time, and it was more common to wear only the part that protected the torso. The era of the mighty medieval knights had come to an end, but the ideal of the noble knight, protector of peace and justice, will live forever in our history.